What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Celtics Blog Podcast. A little bit different today. I know we didn't release on Friday. I wanted to wait until the Saturday because I was very, very sad on the Friday, as my boy, Mr. Will Weir, was very, very sad on the Friday. However, we are joined by somebody that was the opposite of sad. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have seen his mockingly happy laugh, is what I would call it. He's had some rough years. He's had some rough years. A good friend of mine, Mr. Jonathan Macri. John, man, thanks for joining the show, bro.
It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a what did we just witness laugh. I didn't know how to process that game. I certainly didn't know how to process that ending. And it was also kind of crazy because I was doing a live watch along for the game and with a room full of Knicks fans and just like kind of talking through the game, and like there was obviously some lows early on and then there was some highs, so that was just kind of my reaction to the whole thing.
I mean, my reaction was very different. Um, my reaction was one of like picture this, yeah. I wake up, I have no notifications on, usual jig. Everybody knows the way I operate now. Yet there's people on WhatsApp. I think Will messaged me, maybe. My buddy Tim messaged me, my buddy Brendan messaged me. And basically everyone was like, man, just try and have a good day. That was basically the gist of things. So I'm like, what happened? So obviously I'm like, I can't wait now. So I check the scores. I'm like, oh, okay, so it was a loss. I can deal with a loss. Like I've been dealing with them all season. I'll be okay. And then I watched the game and I didn't deal with it very well.
Yeah.
It was very, very hurtful. Will, how were you feeling with it, man?
Well, it ruined my night. My today's been okay. I've kind of gotten over it. But last night it was, last night going through the emotions of it, I watched back some of the game this morning because for some reason I'm a glutton for punishment. And, I was looking back and really when I started to get that feeling of, and I know the Knicks fans have experienced this too. It's just been this up and down chaos of a season and, unmet expectations. I think both of our seasons could kind of be titled that. And it was that 10-2 run at the end of the first half the Knicks went on when they kind of re-woke up Madison Square Garden. And that's right then when I knew I had this sinking feeling that was going to be a big moment. And even though the Celtics got the lead back up to 20, as a Celtics fan that's seen this over and over and over again, I knew that was going to be something that I'd harken back to. And then it happened again at the end of the third quarter. And the rest is history. But it was a tough watch. It was tough feelings, and the post-game press conferences did little to help that.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, you guys obviously could speak more to that than I could. I mean, I read the quotes. I didn't see the video of Udoka, but it seems as if in a season full of some, shall we say, interesting post-game press conferences in Boston, that one, did it take the cake? I don't know. You guys tell me.
I mean, let me jump into this real quick, Adam. The answer is yes, because it absolutely did. And it's a buildup to it, though, Jonathan. It's like we've heard a lot of those same answers. You can copy and paste those responses, and you can insert them to 6 different games that have happened throughout the year, and it's been the same answers. But this time, it just boiled over, because especially when you put on top of it the back-to-back against the Spurs the night before, where there's a lot of similarities that happened. I think last night was certainly a tipping point, at least from Celtics Twitter, looking at the reactions to Ime. Last night was definitely a tipping point.
I mean, for me, it was like, okay, so the best way I can describe it is, what, like when you're watching a comedy sketch and some dude's behind the desk and he's giving a press conference or he's having a briefing during a meeting, then he stands up and he's just in his boxer shorts, and then you get the clown music, and that was it. Like I was waiting for the punchline, but the punchline was in Udoka. I'm really not impressed, dude. But somebody that's impressed you, ex-Celtic, well, impressed you last night. He hasn't been impressed. I read your newsletter quite regularly. Mr. Evan Fournier, hey man, what's going on, dude? Have you spoke to Fournier? Have you asked him why is he continually hurting us like this?
Yeah, we're old pals by now. I think it's so funny because you create enough content in written and spoken form, and you have to try to find different ways to say things over the course of a season. And I forget what it was, a game in the last 10 days for sure. I want to say it was even in the last week, where Fournier just had a game where, forget the fact that I think he was like 1 for 8 or 0 for whatever. I don't even know what it was. But the effort, and I use that term with some big air quote energy, effort on the other end of the court was not exactly where you'd want it to be. And I just came right out and said during the post game, I'm like, just, F you, Evan Fournier. And I did. I was not. I said the whole word, but I won't say it on here. It's been such a frustrating season, and in some ways, last night was the best example of why it's been such a frustrating season, because anyone who's watched him over the course of his career, not only with Team France, but like in Orlando at times and in Boston for a brief period last year, like we know that this guy is a baller when he wants to be, in every sense of that word. Or what do they call it? Like a real hooper. Like Evan Fournier could be a real hooper when he wants to be. And it has been evident to me this year, at least, that desire has not been there on his part. And I don't know if it's, internal issues with the team or whatever the case it may be. But what we saw last night, it was almost like I mean, it was an amazing game. Don't get me wrong, but it was almost like a slap in the face. Like, dude, we know what it looks like when you make it a point to play this way. And he played because it's not just about him hitting shots, as you guys well know. It's his whole demeanor on the court. The way he was defending, I know Jason Tatum had a great game, but the way he was defending Jason Tatum last night was like, man, come on, you could do that whenever you want. Just why don't you do it more often?
So I'm interested to know a little bit more, because it sounds like for you, it's really just a mindset with Evan Fournier. He's been killing the Celtics when we played you guys this year, and I don't know. I guess just it's inexplicable. Can't really defend whatever happened last night. That 41 points, it was insane to watch. But it sounds like throughout the rest of the year, every time that Evan Fournier has to this point let the Knicks down, it sounds like for you, it's more just it's that mindset. And I'm curious to know, like, the Knicks, much like the Celtics, like I said, have been somewhat of a disappointment based on expectations. What do you think's playing into that mindset? Is it a team thing, a culture thing, or like where's it coming from, I guess?
It's interesting you asked that, because I think about his post-game presser last night, and he was talking. I think it was in reference to Julius Randle's, frustrations and how the team has been up and down, and they keep getting off to these awful starts out of the gate, almost regardless of who's in the starting lineup. And he talked about how guys will have, like, someone will have a night on this night and someone else will have a night on that night when the shot's falling for them here, or it's the shot's falling for somebody else on a different evening. But he was like, we can never get it together on the same night. And I don't know if he said it in as many words, but the implication was clear, is like there is a lack of cohesion. There is the thing that the basketball magic, when you watch a team that is just functioning at a high level, which you guys have certainly seen over the years, and like honestly the Knicks saw last year, when the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, he was essentially admitting that's not happening here. We haven't found that together. So, I'm not even putting the blame mostly on him, because look at Randall. You could look at RJ Barrett, who went through a month and a half stretch where he was arguably the least efficient high volume shooter in basketball. And then the Kemba Walker of it all, which is like, I don't even know what to say about Kemba at this point. Talk about an up and down season, and our centers have been inconsistent. Everybody's been inconsistent. So I don't know. I don't know if last night's going to be a spark that turns their season around. I mean, ultimately it does come down to these players who are more ball dominant players, Kemba, RJ, Julius, Evan, figuring out how to share, how to play nicely together. Like, I don't know how you phrase it, but figure out something.
I was muted. As a Celtics cover, we've had them same discussions on our side too. Like, it's the same thing. When Tatum's hot, Brown's not. When Brown's hot, Tatum's not. When player X decides to have a good game, everybody else just decides to sit there and let it happen. No cohesion. Same thing. But the difference is, like, you guys seem to really get geared up for very specific games. Like, you've played. We've seen these two teams, the Celtics and Knicks, play each other 3 times this season at this point. Each time I've came away thinking, how are the Knicks where they are, and how is their record what it is when they consistently put in an effort like this? So obviously there's that rivalry, that division rivalry as well. But
I think, but to me, it's like the effort has been there. It's not a matter of who they're playing. I mean, granted, national TV Randall has kind of become a thing, where if you can actually look at, somebody sent this to me a week or two ago. If you look at his numbers, his averages in national TV games versus all other games, it's almost like two different players. For me, though, it's much more about within games because again, you're talking about an effort level that the Knicks came out with last night. Well, it's the same team that went down by 25 points, and like
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
fair.
saying I'm not saying the Celtics didn't play well, and because they did, they were moving the ball, they were defending well, but like that was maybe 50, if anything, maybe like 60% Celtics, 40% Knicks. I mean, the effort that they came out of the gate with, and just some of the what I call it a lack of urgency, a lack of poise, a lack of whatever you want to say, that has been present in at least one stretch of literally every game they've played this year. Sometimes, most of the time, it happens in the first quarter. Occasionally, it's happened in the second half. It almost always happens with the starting five, though, and that's where the frustration lies, and that's why you hear a lot of. I don't know how much you pay attention to Nick's Twitter, but there's always calls for. For a while it was like bench Julius for Obi. In some corners of the fan base. Now it's like you got to start Emmanuel quickly because lo and behold, anytime and Emmanuel quickly, to his credit, I think I looked it up last night. He's 26th in the league in plus minus, out of whatever 500 some odd players. Like good things happen when he enters the game, and yet you have different guys go into and out of the starting lineup. Like Derrick Rose was the plus minus god here for the better part of a whole season. They put him in the starting lineup. What happened? He goes down with the ship. It's just they can't figure out how to get those pieces to mesh from the opening jump until the end of the game.
Can we talk about RJ Barrett for a minute here? Because I think he's a guy that I'm having.
You're
I
gonna
love
get me
your
in trouble.
reaction to it. Well, he's
You're
a guy
gonna get me in trouble. That's all.
He's someone I have a really hard time getting a read on because I like him. I like RJ Barrett. He's a guy that I think has a lot of potential. And, this year it feels like it's certainly been a bit of a regression. You look at last night, he hits the big game-winning shot. He has 6 points down, or excuse me, I think he had 4 points down the stretch, plus that alley-oop to Mitchell Robinson, yep. In a big spot. So he played a huge role in the ultimate outcome, with a pretty overall disappointing night really up into that point. And that's been kind of his season. I think when I look at the Knicks, I always check in. I have, I'm from Boston. I live in Austin, Texas now, but I got a lot of good friends. I lost a bet last night, so I might be in a Julius Randle jersey on one of these podcasts coming up soon.
Not on this podcast, you won't be.
No, it might be the other one, man. I don't know. I had it all set up. He has a son coming this weekend. He was going to be in a Celtics, beanie when he's born. It was perfect. It was set up, and it all fell apart, as we know. But RJ Barrett is a guy that I've had a real hard time. I think he's such a crucial piece to who the Knicks are now and into the future that I'm curious to get your take on where he is and where you think he can go and what in his future with the team.
Well, okay, let me start by saying where he is right now. Like it's so I don't even know how to answer that, and here's why. 2 nights ago, or excuse me, I guess 3 nights ago now, the last game the Knicks played before they played the Celtics. He goes in against an Indiana team that has, I mean, say what you want about Miles Turner. He's not the best defensive center, but he is leading the league in blocks, and he can kind of influence what you're doing. They also got Sabonis. Like RJ Barrett went in and had, I actually would go so far as to say his best game in terms of finishing at the rim that he's had in his entire career. He was an absolute master of every aspect of his craft. I think he was like something like 8 for 11 or something on twos in the restricted area. I mean, he just like the dribble was nice. The finishing was nice. Like he was patient. His footwork was exquisite. Everything top notch. And then you watch that same player, allegedly that same guy, didn't. It wasn't like a face-off situation where John Travolta and Nick Cage swapped bodies. Although maybe it was, I don't know. Because the player that I saw last night, and as we've seen a lot this season and last season and his rookie year, was a guy who looked like it was the first time he was ever shooting a basketball around a rim. And look, Robert Williams, amazing defensive presence. You could probably argue that he's better than Turner when they're both at their best. But it was so far from what we had seen the previous night. And he had been good for a couple games actually before the Indiana game where he'd been finishing well. And he went through a stretch earlier this season, 4 or 5 games in a row. Really good. And then in between, it's like a guy. He just like I don't know how you guys feel. To me, I watch him try to finish sometimes in these games where he's not finishing well, and it looks like a guy who is like it's so ugly. It makes you feel like he's never going to get better at that aspect of his game. And I single that out because to me, how he does around the rim with his size and how crafty he can be and how good he could be finishing, that's going to determine his ceiling as an NBA player. Because I think the jump shot's going to be fine. I think he's going to be fine on defense long term. To me, it's can you be something like 85% of Jimmy Butler from 10 feet around the rim and in? Because if you could be that, then you can be a fringe all-star, if things break right. But like it's just been a very inconsistent year. That's all. And at this point, like to answer your question about what he's going to be long term, I don't know. I don't know because we haven't seen enough consistency for anybody to make that assessment. Honestly. No.
Okay, so now while we're talking about inconsistent play, not knowing where a ceiling is, not understanding what the hell a guy is doing in terms of his own development, basically, we're just so very used to seeing somebody show us great flashes and then real bad moments. That's pretty much an entire roster of Celtics players right now. And as an outsider, I really want your take on where, like, you're watching the game last night. You've seen the Celtics minimum 2 other times this season.
More than that, I probably watched him about, I don't know, 8-10 times. Yeah.
My condolences, man. Well, what are your takeaways, man? If you were to if someone was to say to you, like they've just came from a demon portal from I've been playing World of Warcraft, a demon portal from hell, and they're like, "Yo, I want to know what can you fill me in on the Boston Celtics right now? What would be your key points to let them know this is what to expect?"
I mean, so from when we used to podcast together, how high I am on Jason Tatum. I had him whenever I forget what the age was where we were like 23 and under or 24 and over, whatever it was at the time. And I had Doncic 1 and I had Tatum 2.
Okay.
And I don't know that I could say that anymore. I feel like maybe, and again, I don't have everybody's ages in front of me, but I feel like I probably put Donovan Mitchell ahead of Jason Tatum now at this point in terms of hierarchy. I guess Devin Booker too, right? Although Booker's a little older. But like Tatum to me is still in like the top 5 guys in terms of like, young, quote unquote, young stars in the league. And like last night to me, he showed it. I just think maybe is Jaylen Brown, who again, my impression of Jaylen Brown is a guy who is immensely skilled and immensely talented. But is he the right guy to play off of Tatum? That's my impression from the outside, and also paying attention to like Celtics Twitter and like reading stuff about the Celtics and like seeing highlights and whatnot. I don't know. Am I completely off base? I don't know.
No, you're pretty much there. I mean, the one thing that I'll tell you this stat, and I told Will the other day, so it's not a new stat for Will. If I told you that Jaylen Brown had as many assists as he does turnovers for his career, how would you be surprised?
Well, no, because I think that's. But again, like Jason Tatum, I'll get back to Brown in a second, but like Tatum can pass, right? He can pass, but he like if you have Jason Tatum on your team, you want Jason Tatum to like do what Jason Tatum does very well, and that's like make really incredible plays with the basketball, usually towards the rim. I feel like to have a guy next to him who's a worse passer or a less willing or less aware. I don't know what it is with Brown. I don't watch enough basketball of them, but like that to me maybe is the issue. And I look back through recent NBA history. When have 2 guys, neither of whom is a really top level playmaker for others, when have those pairings worked long term? I don't really know if there is one that we could point to and say like, yeah, this gives me hope for these 2 together.
Yeah.
So here's what.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to ask you anyway, Will. I was going to ask you this question, and then I'll get John to loop in with his answer as well. You've got another team in the Eastern Conference with 2 players with very similar skill sets, right? And you've got Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner, very similar type of shooting big men that like to play above the break, blah 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 blah. And that's not working right now. Hasn't worked. They've tried multiple iterations of that roster. You then come and swing your eyes around to Boston, and it feels like they're closer to the Pacers than they are to the Nets, or they are to the Bucks. Bucks probably being a more logical because they didn't sell their soul to get their own players.
Yeah, I mean that's very accurate, unfortunately, and it's kind of one of the things, like to your point, Jonathan, of like where have you seen these two wings, and I kind of look a little bit so to the Bulls and then also the Clippers, and let me kind of explain why. And I'm not saying that those have worked, but just as other examples of two wings being your main dominant players, your 1A and your 1B, or your 1 and 2, however you want to label it. And I've always said that once it became apparent the Jays were going to be the pillars of the Celtics, let's look to the Clippers and see what works and what doesn't work. And we need to learn from that as far as how they're building around Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I think Tatum and Brown, similar guys. Obviously you can talk about the differences, but generally kind of two-way wings that you want to build around. And you look at what the Bulls are doing, and you look at how they have Vucevic and they have Lonzo Ball and they have these other surrounding pieces that are, for me, they're exceeding my expectations going into the season. I thought they'd be better. I thought they'd be good. I think they'd be a 1 seed, getting close to halfway through the season. And for me, that's why I thought it was interesting when Adam brought up the Pacers. And for me, I'm curious if a guy like Sabonis could be a Vucevic. Now, how we get him, I don't know. Bunch of draft picks, Rob Williams, maybe. I don't know what that pathway looks like. But to your point, I'm trying to figure out how do you make the Jays work and maybe accentuate it, where we've talked a lot of playing through bigs and maybe having a guy like Sabonis. Could that be something that's an answer? I'd love to hear just, off the cuff, maybe what your thoughts would be on something like that.
I mean, so you're basically talking about adding Sabonis to the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, how you get there, I'm not sure if that's even, an option depending on what the Pacers want, but in theory, yes.
So to me, you're basically talking about having Sabonis be your point center, right? In that scenario, because like it's interesting you brought up Kawhi and Paul George. Like last year, Kawhi and Paul George both averaged over 5 assists a game. You bring up DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Like Zach LaVine came up as a point guard. DeMar DeRozan had 7 assists a game for San Antonio. He was running point forward. Like these guys are maybe passing isn't their bread and butter, but like they can do it at a really elite level. And I think in Tatum, we have a guy who can do it. Maybe not at an elite level, maybe not even at close to elite level. And then in Brown, do you have a guy who can he do it, like to your stat that you just quoted, Adam? Can he do it at all? So I don't know that adding a player at that position, the center position, to try to, divvy up. I don't know, to like direct you off. I don't know. Is that the cure all here? I'm just fascinated by Brown, because to me, Brown, I mean, what did he had 50 a couple nights ago? He's a guy, to me, I think pretty clearly could be a number 1 scoring option on a team. I don't know what the trade is, or if there is a trade out there, but like to really try to get something, God, like again, we're talking off the top of our heads here, right? So like, I don't know if they would send him to Sacramento, but like, could you get the Kings to give up both Fox and like an unprotected first round, or like forget about Fox? Can you get them to give up Halliburton and like a future unprotected first? Like I would and again, I'm gonna be very clear here. Jaylen Brown's not nearly Jaylen Brown is much better than Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox, but just in terms of a fit issue, to pick up an extra asset issue, if it were me, I would wonder maybe about something like that. And then there's obviously the Ben Simmons of it all, which I don't even know. I don't even know how I feel about Ben Simmons, so I don't know how. I'm not going to ask you how you guys feel about that, but like, I don't know. I would, and I'm not saying that's a move you make now, but I wonder if it comes to the offseason, like, is it time to at least kick the tires? Because he's only got 2 more years left on the extension, right? And then he's a free agent.
Yeah. After this year, yeah.
So if you're the Knicks, if you're the Knicks and you like, right, we need a number 1 scoring option, because our number 1 scoring option's not been working right now.
What are we giving you?
Well, this is what I'm about to ask you. This is what I'm about. You're the Knicks guy.
What do we have that you want? We don't have anything good enough to get Jaylen Brown.
So that's what I wanted to hear. Now we can move on.
Sorry, any Knicks fans who are listening to this.
I put you in a position there. I'm sorry. No, moving on though.
I'll always be honest. I don't care.
But that's how a lot of Celtics fans feel when they're talking about moving on from Jaylen Brown. It's like a lot of people expect to get back a like tier 2 star, but a lot of people are starting to view Jaylen Brown as that tier 3 type option for the Celtics. You know what I mean? So it's really hard finding where that value would be. Like, you know,
I think no, I was gonna say I think it's tricky because like it, you know, if a team is trading for him to be their, you know, quote unquote number one option, like what does a team that has Jaylen Brown as their number one option look like? And I think you could find examples throughout the years of like teams being pleasantly surprised with that answer. Like, I don't know, is Zach LaVine still technically a number one option on Chicago? I guess so. I don't. Yeah, it's like in between. But like, there's a guy who like, if you told me this is the way Jack LaVine's career trajectory was going to go 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been like, no way. And here he is, and he's, you know, one of the at the very least 2 most important players on the best team in the East. You know, so there maybe there's still some growth from Brown to come, but I also, if I was a team that would pay what I have to imagine Brad Stevens would ask for, like, oh boy, you'd have to be pretty confident to feel like this is the guy, you know?
Yeah, I can't lie, Jonathan. Ever since you brought up Halliburton, you've awakened my third eye here, and like I'm just going through, you know, different trade scenarios, and like it's honestly one I hadn't thought, because I think everyone defaults to, oh, is there a Brown and a Fox trade? And you know, there's like you got the Fox, Halliburton, Mitchell, whatever they're doing in Sacramento backcourt, and so there's some move to be made, and you know, it made me start thinking about, you know, what about a Halliburton, a pick, and then for salary you have to put in whether it's Heald or Barnes or something like that. I know Adam absolutely hates Buddy Hield, so
yeah,
he would prefer Harris.
Barnes.
He would prefer Barnes, and I'm fine with that. But I do think like, hey, that's actually an interesting idea. That, you know, talking to somebody like you who's not in the weeds with the Celtics like we are, that's an idea I've never thought of, and it's actually one that, I don't know, maybe it does have appeal, because we're all just trying to, just like the Knicks, we're trying to grasp at straws here with like the assets we have and figure out what are the answers, and they're really hard to figure out.
Yeah, and I mean the difference is like you know, both of those guys are premium assets. Like the Knicks right now have Julius Randle, who's I don't know what Julius is. Julius Randle an asset on his new extension? I don't really think he is. Not right now, at least. Yeah. And you know, and then like our best nominal asset after that is RJ Barrett, who I just got done talking about. Like, you know, I wrote today for my newsletter. I was like, you know, somebody asked me in a mailbag question, like, what do you think? What would you give RJ Barrett in an extension? And I had trouble even getting to like $100 million number. You know, even over. You know, I think he's going to get like north of 20 million. You know, but is he worth that? Like, I don't know. Mikal Bridges just got north of $20 million a year, and that dude is the 3rd or 4th best player on our finals team. Can RJ Barrett be that? We haven't seen it yet. You know, so it's just really tough to talk about assets from a Knicks perspective and what they're gonna get, which is why I kind of just want to, like, my whole thing this season has been like, let's focus on us and get us right, and then we could start to figure out how we make it you know, better from the outside.
You sound like you're trying to save a marriage.
I am. I'm in a very unhealthy. I've been in a very unhealthy relationship with this team for 30 years.
How'd you do it, man? Because like this is like I'm struggling at like 6 weeks of this type of play, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done, bro. They need to figure this out. I remember speaking to you during the first lockdown where you're like, dude, the Knicks are so bad. I've been covering basketball when I haven't seen any basketball for nearly 130 days. Do you remember?
Yeah, and I was like, I remember. It was rough, but no, I mean, look, this team's in my blood. I don't know. It's healthy or otherwise. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So let's wrap it up and just say that the Knicks are playing the Celtics again today when everybody's listening. If anyone's listening on Sunday, they played them yesterday. So at this point, you might as well just skip. What's your prediction? Do they tie up the season series 2-2? Or do the Knicks go 3-1?
I'd be surprised if the Knicks won this game. I think it'll be close because these teams always seem to play close games. But I would be surprised if the Knicks went into the Garden and won the game, because look, if we're being honest, the Celtics were the better team last night, and they just kind of got a little whatever you want to call it, sloppy, lazy, lackadaisical. And I still don't expect. So, well, actually, you know what? Can I give one caveat? If Kemba plays, I'm a little bit more hopeful, and yet there's a part of me that is like, if Kemba plays, I don't even know if I should be more hopeful, because again, we haven't seen it. And that's not a comment against Kemba. That's a comment with how Kemba has fit with the other pieces on the team. But if you're asking me to predict right now, no, I don't think the Knicks will win this game. I think the season series will be tied up.
Will, what's your prediction, my guy?
Well, first of all, Knicks and Celtics fans, just with your mindset and the way that you're talking about this team, we feel like one and the same. We feel like long lost brothers during the season, because almost everything you're saying can somehow be, transcribed to something about the Celtics. I think the way the Celtics have operated this year, when the sky's falling, they find a way to get a win in a game that they probably shouldn't win, or the team feels like we shouldn't win. So, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to probably have, I think, a definitive game where it's like, see, this is a team that we can be, and then we're going to go right back and revert to who we've been the rest of the season. So I think the Celtics pulled this one out, but it is what it is.
I would like to say that, Macri, you seem really relaxed and chilled, and I know you're at work, but we need more of that happy energy, man. That laughing all the way through.
Listen, that was as good a win, even with the Randall stuff, that I don't know if has really hit your guys' radar yet today.
Oh, thumbs down. It definitely has.
Yeah, the thumbs down. Even with that, I think this was the best win of the year. I feel good about it. I'm enjoying it. I've accepted the fact that they're not gonna tank this year. They're gonna go for it this year, and I want that. I'm on board with it. I want them to try to, whether they get the 10th seed or the 8th seed or the whatever seed. I would like to see what they could do if they make one more run. And who knows? You know what? Crazier things have happened in a team like this. Because here's the thing I will say about the Knicks: they have talent. There's real talent on this team, up and down the roster. No elite talent, but 1 through 10, they have real talent. And if they could just figure it out, I'd be more excited. Maybe this game gets them started on the path to figuring it out. I don't know. We'll see.
I think we can leave it there. The one thing I will say is all three of us have done very well to minimize the Ime Udoka discussion. I'm pleased with all of us. I think we all deserve a pat on the back. John, man, thank you for joining us. Before you go, I feel like everybody needs to understand where they can get more Macri in their lives.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Why wouldn't you want more of this? You could go to my Twitter account. What is it? JC Macri NBA. Just search Knicks Film School podcast, Knicks Film School YouTube channel, Knicks Film School. What else we got? Patreon, Knicks Film School on TeePublic, as I'm wearing right now. But I think that's it. But thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun to reminisce about one of the few bright spots of our year.
Oh, look, that smile's coming back now. That smile's coming back now.
At your expense. So it was good. I appreciate the opportunity.
Nah, it's all good, man. Thank you for joining, man. And I'll be on your podcast again soon.
Yeah, it's your turn to come on mine now.
Yeah, I got you, man. Anytime you want. Appreciate it.
Take
John.
care, guys. Be well.
All right, man. Take care, Jonathan.
So it's just myself and Will. We're going to just round this out with some of our own thoughts at this point. I feel like we need to just kind of get a few more things off our chest. John,
is this the unloading on Ime Udoka part that you just talked about us avoiding?
No. We're gonna have a discussion. First of all, I want to let everyone know that Jonathan Macri does great work. Make sure you go follow him. He's a true funny guy. When he seems rather subdued, I think work's getting him down. He's too busy partying with the hangover. That's what that is. So yeah, dude, let's get into it. You text me this morning and called him Mr. Nia Long. Yeah. So
he's no longer Ime Udoka. He's Mr. Nia Long. I just, man, we talked at the very beginning, Adam, about ruining your day. It ruined my night, that game last night. And I rewatched parts of it this morning, and there's certainly more parts that you can put on the players that I probably, in the heat of the moment last night chose to overlook. But man, just the most consistent pitfalls of this season seem to keep coming back to the same themes over and over and over again, and then the same tired quotes and lack of taking responsibility for the words that you're using are happening again and again and again. And it all goes back to Mr. Nia Long. And I know we talked about cutting down on this type of talk. It's at a boiling point. We briefly touched on it with Jonathan last night. I think it hit a boiling point with a lot of Celtics fans, and I think it's rightfully so. He's been a bad coach. He's been a bad coach this year. Doesn't mean that that's going to be my opinion of him now and or forever. It's not my forever opinion. He absolutely can change that. But I think through what almost half a season, he's been an absolutely bad coach, and I don't think there's any other way to define his tenure thus far.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more along the lines of he, as a coach, I don't feel like I can say he's been a bad coach because I'm not there day to day. But I think that his coaching decisions and his coaching style just are not what I would have wanted personally. Like, at the end of the day, and people who follow me on Twitter have seen me going back and forth with people about this all day on Friday. You cannot run 3 non-shooters in a closing 5 down the stretch of a close game. You cannot take away that spacing. This is 2022 basketball, not 1995 basketball. Spacing is one of the most sought after commodities of an NBA offense, in my opinion. I believe that, if you want to attack the rim, guess what you need? You need spacing. Right now, one of Udoka's comments was like, hey, I'm running Schroeder, Smart, and Tatum because that gives me 3 ball handlers on the floor, but it also allows the defense to load up on the strong side, so you never get that driving kick out to the Jaylen Brown in the corner or out to the Jaylen Brown in the wing, because the defense know that's coming and they're going to take that away. Sure, someone's going to have to stick with Jaylen on the weak side. I get that, but that still leaves 4 other guys. And if you're going Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder, Robert Williams, Jalen, and Jason, no one's really going to care about Robert above the break. They're going to drop to protect the rim, so they can kind of load up towards the strong side a little bit and just kind of watch their 6 to make sure they don't get back cut. And then you've got basically a 3-man wall stopping you hitting the paint before you kick that rock. So if that's why Udoka's running that system, and if that's the plan he has to let these 3 kind of dictate the way the offense flows between themselves. And we saw some good ghost screen catch and shoot threes off Marcus Smart. He hit 2 of them. He missed 4 of them. Hit 2, you know. But at the end of the day, if you had the spacing, you wouldn't need to rely on that interchangeability as much. You could run some actual basketball and get something done. So definitely his coaching decisions, his rotations, his minute management, all been poor. And for me, it's the fact that it seems to be everybody else's fault except his. That's where my biggest contention point lies.
I mean, I assume either you watched or read some of his post-game press conferences, his quotes from last night.
Yes, sir.
And those were maybe some of the most infuriating, comments I've heard this season. We've talked a lot about he preaches accountability, but to your last point, he rarely takes accountability for his own shortcomings or his coaching staff shortcomings. There was one quote where he had last night about, a lack of leadership on this team, which I think many could argue a lot of times that comes from the head coach, but maybe not. But I think that is potentially something where an area where it could come from. He talked about, pausing the momentum, the pace of play to run and call a play. And, there's part of me inside that just screams out leadership and coaching, calling plays. That is basically the foundation of what a coach does. And you're openly saying right now that needs to come from the players and not from the coach. And there's something that's just not correlating, and I don't get it. And I really struggle to understand some of these quotes matching up with his actions and what's happening. And I don't know, man, Adam. I honestly spent a lot of time last night after that game ended. TNT broadcast went right into I think it was the Clippers and Suns, and half of that game was on my screen. And I was on Twitter the entire time, reading and watching every press conference. I didn't watch the whole game. I watched half of that game without actually watching it because I was so infuriated and couldn't stop hate reading Twitter and all of the stuff that was coming out from that game last night. I'm at a breaking point, and Ime has broken me with a lot of the stuff that's been going on with him.
So I completely understand where he's coming from in terms of The players are the ones on the floor. They're the ones that feel the defensive adjustments. They see the defensive changes. So they understand how a defense is playing them from minute to minute. Having a guy there that can call plays, fantastic. Having a guy there that can calm the ship and start dictate. That's one of the reasons LeBron James is so effective, even when he's having an off night, is because he can dictate the way his offense run. Player-led teams, I'm completely fine with that to an extent, but the best coaches are the ones that call plays on the sidelines. You used to always hear Brad Stevens shouting stuff. Do you know what I mean? You see Mike Budenholzer walking up and down the sideline, calling out sets. You know, hand signals, hand gestures to the main ball handler to open a play up. So when he's like, "Do I need to call a timeout and draw up a play?" Shouldn't you already have kind of 5 or 6 go-to plays for late game situations in the bank that you've drilled into your team that you have a hand signal for? Shouldn't that, like, isn't that a prerequisite of high level coaching? That you're like, right, let me go to the playbook. We've worked on this. We've drilled this all through training camp. This is how we close out these type of games. Right, we're gonna go horns, flare with a back cut that ends up in somebody jumping on a rocket and doing some Space Jam stuff. Like, just you know what I mean? Like, seriously, like, I feel like there's a lack of preparation from Udoka's part, and part of this is because he's a rookie coach, and I'm all for giving him enough of a
And
learning curve.
that's a very fair point for him that needs to be accounted for.
But at the same time, like, you're not giving rookie players opportunities to grow and succeed. So what makes you think the fan base is going to give you that time to grow and succeed when we see you're not giving your, because you got to understand, man, like, one of the biggest problems for the Celtics right now is outside of Jaylen Brown, Robert Williams, Jason Tatum, there's not really many tradable assets. And if you want to develop those tradable assets, you have to give them an opportunity to grow.
Yeah,
And you're not doing that.
100%.
And I think there's some sour grapes there as well when you're putting non-shooters on the floor down the stretch, and Aaron Neesmith, who has been poor this year, so I do understand, isn't on the floor at any point. Or, you know, there's just there's
well,
missed
here's the thing.
opportunities.
He even talked about in one of his other quotes of, you know, he's okay with Marcus and Dennis taking these shots when they're open, and then he caveats it with no one's really shooting the ball well except for Josh Richardson and Grant Williams. And guess how many minutes the two of them played combined last night in the fourth quarter, Adam?
I'm going for 30.
0.
Oh, you meant, oh, sorry,
in the fourth quarter. Sorry.
Oh no,
sorry.
yeah,
Just
sorry.
I
thought you meant combined as in their minutes.
Yeah. Roughly, like, that was about right. That was about right for the. Apologies, I take back my emphatic reaction. That was correct for the game, but for the fourth quarter, they played 0 minutes combined. So it's like I don't understand how you can make that comment, but then in the game you don't play. That doesn't correlate. It doesn't make any sense. And you know, you talked about, like, with Schroeder out there, like, you can somewhat rationalize, you know, in a way, I guess, that of having that lineup. But as many times have we seen it not work. Like, you have to do something different because you're also negating your second best player by the way that they're utilizing JB, just being kind of off in the corner, drifting in the wing. He had 0 shot attempts after the last 8 minutes and 43 seconds of that game last night. Yes, you can put some of that on the players and maybe not finding him. And certainly there's that clip going around of Marcus Smart missing him on that wide open swing pass where he should have had him with about 5 seconds left on the shot clock. I think about minute something left in the game. But part of that's got to be on the coaching, that you're not getting your second best player, who's an all-star that had 50 points 2 games ago, and he gets 0 shots the last 8 minutes and 43 seconds. That can't all be on the players. There has to be a coaching aspect to that as well.
Yeah, you're just basically saying your gravity is going to be what opens it. I don't like. Look, man. Honestly, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I think at this point, you know, we had some good laughs with John. We spoke about some value, and I feel like me and you could really just go on for another hour like this. So I'm going to call it because it's Saturday.
Everyone's over. It's over.
Yeah, I'm going to call it. So before we go, if you like this podcast, make sure you hit those 5 stars. They turn gold. Make sure you scroll down. You write Adam, Will, and Greg. When they're not upset, they're very good podcasting people. When they are upset, they're still very good podcasting people. If you don't use an Apple device, then my man Will, who's had time to recover from the disappointment more than I have, is going to let you know what you need to do next.
So when you're out today and you're trying to, regain your composure. Maybe you're at the nail salon. Maybe you're out getting a massage, a pedicure, a manicure. You're out there doing some yoga. Make sure you tell all of those people around you in your life, number one, namaste. Number two, go check out the Celtics Blog podcast with Adam, Will, and Greg. You won't regret it. You may regret watching the Celtics, but you won't regret listening to this podcast.
I never regret recording the podcast.
Same.